Welcome back to the deep dive, and specifically to Congress in Context.
Great to be here.
We're here to cut through the noise, get straight to what matters on Capitol Hill, and this past week, it felt less like business as usual.
Definitely. More like a high-stakes chess match, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Largely dominated by this one massive piece of legislation. People were calling it the One Big Beautiful Bill Act,
Yep,
H.R. 1.
that's the one. Took up a lot of oxygen, especially in the Senate.
So our mission, like always, is to unpack these, well, complex congressional moves, distill the key insights, and show you why it actually matters to your life.
And it really was a week that showed the whole range, didn't it? From the daily routine in the House, the prayer, the pledge,
Right.
all the way to these intense ideological battles in the Senate and dozens of new bills popping up.
Yeah, tackling everything from local stuff to, well, global conflicts.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's start by pulling back the curtain a bit. Key actions from both chambers. Let's hit the House first. June 30th seemed, well, interesting.
It did. You had this dual focus going on.
Right, like practical governing alongside these bigger national security type moves.
Precisely. You saw the Natural Resources Committee moving H.R. 10044. Pretty specific stuff, right? Kauai project permits.
Mm-hmm.
But then you also had Energy and Commerce with H.R. 1709 focusing on mobile network cybersecurity.
So tending to the nation's plumbing, as you might say, but also playing that strategic game.
Couldn't have put it better. And beyond the committee work, a whole slew of new bills.
Yeah, what caught your eye there?
Well, the sheer variety, really. H.R. 4253 aiming for more mental health support in schools. That's education and workforce.
Important stuff.
Then you pivot to armed services, H.R. 4254, a proposal for a military service medal for the Iran-Israel war, including Operation Midnight Hammer.
Wow, okay.
And H.R. 4061 from Judiciary trying to tackle fraudulent gun dealings.
Mm-hmm.
Plus a big multi-committee bill, H.R. 4263, aimed at boosting the U.S. nuclear sector's competitiveness abroad.
So it really shows Congress reacting to a huge range of issues, domestic and global.
Constantly.
And resolutions too, right? They give a snapshot of immediate priorities.
They do, like HRES 564 from Foreign Affairs, a really strong call for the return of abducted Ukrainian children before any peace deal.
A powerful statement on human rights there.
Absolutely. And then something quite different, HRES 565 supporting National Tire Safety Week, June 30th to July 4th.
Ah, okay. From global crises to road safety.
It might seem small, but these resolutions often capture the immediate mood, the current focus points on the Hill.
A quick pulse check, as you say.
Exactly.
Okay, so if the House was that steady hum, the Senate, that was an absolute whirlwind.
Oh, yeah.
All consumed by H.R. 1.
Yeah.
The One Big Beautiful Bill Act.
That's right.
This massive reconciliation bill. And maybe we should just quickly remind listeners what that means, reconciliation.
Good idea. It's basically a special process, mostly for budget-related stuff. And the key thing, the really high-stakes part, is it lets a bill pass the Senate with just a simple majority, 51 votes.
So it bypasses that usual 60-vote hurdle, the filibuster threat, that blocks so much legislation.
Exactly. And that process, it completely shapes the debate. It forces these really stark ideological clashes because everyone knows the stakes are incredibly high.
And they use all the procedural tools they can, right?
Oh, absolutely. Points of order, challenging things on budget rules, and of course, the famous vote-a-rama.
It just sounds exhausting.
It is. It's a marathon voting session. Amendment after amendment, often designed just to make a point or put opponents in a tough spot politically.
And those ideological clashes over H.R. 1 were definitely front and center. Democrats came out swinging.
Very strong language.
We heard things like outrageous, cruel, mean, heartless.
Mm-hmm.
The core argument being it was designed purely to, quote, reward the billionaire class and special interests at the expense of everyone else.
They painted a grim picture. Cutting health care, making people sicker, maybe even leading to deaths.
Taking food from the mouths of hungry children was another phrase used. All while giving tax breaks to billionaires who don't need another tax break.
Yeah, they even said Republicans were dead set on walking off a cliff. Really strong stuff.
Okay, so that's one side. What was a Republican defense? How did they counter that?
Well, they defended it fiercely, primarily as an extension of the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, the TCJA,
Right.
which they framed as, quote, one of the most successful economic policy pieces of legislation in history.
Citing what? Low unemployment.
Exactly. 50-year low unemployment, record low poverty, rising wages, all linked back to the TCJA in their view.
So they accused Democrats of,
Politics of fear, that was the phrase used. They insisted the bill was about extending tax relief for the American people.
and on health care. They pushed back on the idea of cuts.
They did. They argued it wasn't about cutting, say, Medicaid, but strengthening it by slowing the growth. Maybe 2–3% annual growth instead of the projected 4.55%.
So fundamentally, different views of the economy, the social safety net, everything.
Completely different philosophies clashing head on.
In that deep divide, it played out in the actual votes, didn't it? Like that procedural move by Leader Schumer.
Right, trying to appeal a ruling by the chair.
He called it a brazen attempt to deceive the American people about the true costs.
But that motion failed, right? 49–51.
Yeah, narrowly failed.
Yeah.
Which really highlights the tight control, the procedural power of the majority in these situations.
It absolutely does. Parliamentary tactics become crucial, especially in reconciliation. The minority tries to throw sand in the gears, expose things they don't like.
Okay, let's talk healthcare amendments specifically. There were several key ones. One tried to get rid of that provision, blocking Medicaid funds for abortion providers for a year.
Yeah, the Murray Amendment.
But it hit a snag, right?
Right. It did. It faced a point of order, basically a challenge, that it broke the budget rules for reconciliation, so it fell.
Which just underscores how strict those budget rules are in this process, even for really significant social policy issues.
Exactly. The rules often dictate the outcome, regardless of the policy substance sometimes.
Then there was another one from Senator Blackburn about Medicaid and CHIP funds.
Right, proposing to block federal funds for people without verified citizenship or immigration status.
And the arguments there.
Opponents said it would hurt innocent people, get them caught in bureaucratic red tape, called it a distraction.
But proponents.
They pointed to potential savings. CBO estimated $163 billion and argued it was about prioritizing vulnerable Americans and seniors.
So that classic tension, fiscal concerns versus humanitarian concerns.
A perfect example, really. Two different ways of looking at the role of government support.
Editor Warnock also weighed in heavily on healthcare cuts, didn't he?
He did. Raised major concerns about over $1 trillion in cuts overall. He specifically mentioned Maryland.
Yeah, 1.5 million Medicaid users, potentially 160,000 losing coverage.
That was his warning. And threats to hospitals, especially rural ones, children's hospitals, those serving lots of low-income patients.
And related votes on Medicaid limitations.
An amendment to strike certain limits was rejected, 48–52. Close again.
And the Sanders Amendment. That was a big one. Lower drug prices, expand Medicare.
Yeah, dental, vision, hearing coverage. That also failed, 47–53. It needed 60 votes for adoption, even under reconciliation rules for certain types of changes.
So these repeated fights over healthcare, especially Medicaid, rural impacts, they really show the deep divides on how we provide care, how we pay for it.
Absolutely. And the failure of that Sanders Amendment also shows how hard it is to get major new expansions through, even popular ones, within this specific constrained process.
Okay, moving beyond healthcare. The economic policy fight, especially taxes. Senator Kelly tried to block tax cuts for the super rich.
Yeah, targeting those making over $500 million a year, arguing against padding the pockets of the richest people.
And the counterargument from Senator Tillis.
He pushed back, saying Republicans actually created the child tax credit, expanded it, doubled it in the TCJA.
And that this bill makes that permanent and increases it.
Right. So, again, that fundamental debate. Who benefits from tax policy? Is it redistribution or broader tax relief for investment?
Worldview differences, like you said.
Exactly.
What about food security? SNP, the food stamp program.
Another flashpoint, Senator Lujan raised serious concerns, said people are going to get hurt by cuts to Medicaid and SNP.
Called it a betrayal.
Yeah, a betrayal of a bipartisan promise to feed our children, our veterans, our seniors, and our working families.
But Senator Boozman had a different take.
He did. He argued SNP spending had almost doubled since 2018, putting it on an unsustainable path.
So the reforms were about
reducing waste, better accountability, encouraging self-reliance. That was the argument.
There was also a specific amendment fight about SNP administrative costs.
Yes. Senator Klobuchar tried to strike a provision delaying requirements for states with high error rates to match funds. She called delaying it fiscal insanity, rewarding waste.
And Boozman's response.
He argued the delay just helps states prepare for the new requirements.
So it's this balance again. Safety nets versus fiscal responsibility, program efficiency, and who pays the administrative costs.
Right. That potential shift of costs onto states is a really critical point. Could impact state budgets, maybe even access to the program itself.
Let's shift to energy. Clean energy tax credits saw some action,
Definitely. Clear partisan splits emerged. Multiple amendments tried to change or end existing credits.
but they mostly failed.
Largely, yes. An amendment by Senator Lee to kill wind and solar credits got only 21 votes, soundly rejected.
Okay.
Others trying to maintain parity for wind and solar or tweak residential credits, also defeated, though sometimes the votes were closer. 47-53, 48-52, 49-51 on some key ones related to clean energy credits.
So the credits survived, mostly.
Right.
But what was that new angle you mentioned?
Ah, yes. The introduction of restrictions based on prohibited foreign entities,
Right.
specifically naming China and Russia,
Meaning,
meaning companies linked to those countries couldn't get certain U.S. energy tax credits. It's a significant shift, tying energy policy directly to national security and, well, geopolitical competition.
that's definitely a new dimension. We'll probably see more of that.
I'd expect so.
And then there was that moment, the tie vote
Right. 50 yeas, 50 nays. On the Padilla Amendment,
for aviation safety funding, using airport lease revenues and a memorial.
yes, for victims of that January mid-air collision near D.C., a 50-50 tie means it fails in the Senate.
Wow. Just shows how incredibly tight the margins are. One vote, one absence changes everything.
A perfect illustration. Every single vote is critical right now.
Okay, so beyond the giant H.R. 1, the Senate did manage some other business nominations.
Yes, move forward on considering Scott Cooper for OPM director.
Office of Personnel Management.
Right. And William Briggs for deputy administrator at the Small Business Administration. Filed cloture, signaling intent to confirm them.
So, keeping the executive branch staffed up. Important, even if it doesn't grab headlines like H.R. 1.
Absolutely vital for actually running the government and implementing policy.
And there was a moment of consensus, too. Senate Resolution 312.
Yes, recognizing June 2025 as LGBTQ Pride Month, passed with bipartisan support.
And the resolution itself, noted, challenges the community faces.
It did. Mention being repeatedly targeted by politically motivated legislation, facing high risks of hate crimes, but also celebrating milestones and the ongoing pursuit of equality and inclusion.
It's a good reminder that even in these polarized times, some common ground can still be found.
It is. Those moments, especially on resolutions expressing values, are important signals.
The record also included tributes, right?
Yeah.
Honoring individuals.
Yes, some really notable people. Michael Kramer, remembered for his legal work and advocacy in education and healthcare.
Frederick W. Smith.
The founder of FedEx, a veteran and absolute industry titan.
And Alana Nichols.
Incredible athlete, Paralympic gold medalist, advocate for women and athletes with disabilities. These tributes offer a human dimension, recognizing diverse contributions.
Okay, so that's a lot to digest from just 1 week. Let's try to connect the dots. What does all this actually mean for you listening right now?
Well, stepping back, the whole H.R. 1 debate gives us huge insights into how Congress works, or maybe struggles to work, right now.
How so?
The constant use of points of order, the vote-a-rama, it shows how procedural rules become weapons, especially in reconciliation. It's about forcing votes, challenging policy on budget grounds, political maneuvering.
And those razor-thin vote margins on so many amendments.
They just scream tight partisan divisions. It's not just policy disagreement, it's strategic warfare sometimes.
Okay, let's drill down to impacts. Healthcare. What's the potential effect?
Well, the debates over Medicaid funding, the potential impact on rural hospitals, the fight over abortion provider funding, these could have very direct consequences for people's access to care, how much it costs.
But there was something potentially offering immediate relief. Insulin costs.
Right. The bill includes caps on insulin cost sharing, up to $35 for a 30-day supply, lasting until early 2027. That could be a tangible benefit for many folks with diabetes.
And taxes. How does that hit home?
The arguments over extending tax cuts, the child tax credit, maybe adjusting rates for the highest earners, that directly impacts your household budget.
It also feeds into the bigger picture of the national debt. It's about who pays, who benefits, and the overall economic direction. Affects your take-home pay, potentially job growth.
And food security, the SNAP changes.
Those proposed changes, especially around administrative costs, potentially shifting to states, could affect access for vulnerable people.
Yeah.
The concern is it could strain state budgets, maybe leading to cuts elsewhere or making the program harder to run effectively.
Energy costs, too, potentially.
Yeah, the future of those clean energy tax credits, plus those new restrictions on foreign involvement from places like China and Russia, that could influence your utility bills down the road.
And the pace of energy innovation generally, that link between energy and national security is really key now.
What about online safety? There was a specific act mentioned.
The Safe Online for Kids Act. This could bring some significant changes for minors online. Things like limiting direct messaging with unknown adults, making kids' data less public.
Parental tools as well.
Yes, more tools for parents. And importantly, banning ads for things like cannabis or alcohol targeted at minors. It directly impacts how kids navigate the digital world.
And border security funding.
More money for infrastructure, for CBP, detention capacity, plus new vetting for unaccompanied kids over 12, checking for criminal or gang ties. That directly shapes immigration policy and border management. Lastly, student loans. What were the proposed changes there?
Couple of things. Allowing people to rehabilitate defaulted loans twice instead of just once.
Okay, more chances.
And introducing new repayment plan options, but mainly for new loans taken out after July 1st, 2026. Could change the financial landscape for future borrowers, maybe offer more flexibility. So looking ahead then, what's next for all this? H.R. 1 specifically.
Well, H.R. 1 now heads to the House. That's the critical next step. Expect more intense debate there. It could still be changed before, potentially going to the president.
Yeah. And the bigger picture trends?
Continued fights over spending, debt, the balance between social programs and tax cuts, that's not going away.
And new issues emerging.
Definitely. Keep an eye on AI regulation and this focus on foreign influence in key sectors like energy. Those seem like growing areas of legislative action.
So for you, our listener, how can you stay plugged in, maybe even get involved?
Your role is crucial. First, understand the bills. Go to congress.gov. You can search by the bill numbers we mentioned, H.R. 1, H.R. 0044, HRES 564, SRES 312, and so on. Read them for yourself.
And contacting representatives?
Absolutely. House member, your 2 senators, find their contact info on their websites, share your views, it matters.
Tracking what's happening next.
Congress.gov is great for tracking hearings, upcoming votes. Reputable news sources covering Congress are essential too.
And beyond just contacting officials.
Consider local groups, advocacy organizations working on issues you care about. Joining forces can amplify your voice. It's not just about voting, it's about ongoing engagement.
This deep dive into just 1 week really shows the intricate tapestry of American governance.
It really does.
It's a system always moving, always reacting, shaped by these really vibrant, sometimes pretty fierce debates. It's not just abstract news, it's the story of how policy shapes your world.
Which really raises that final important question, doesn't it? As Congress tackles everything from huge budgets down to digital privacy and safety. How do we, as citizens, make sure our collective voice actually guides the laws that shape our lives?
It's a dynamic process.
It is. And your engagement, your voice is absolutely vital.